Zodiac.
He was a white male, short, possibly 5'8", was real heavy set, beefy build. Not blubbery fat, but real beefy, possibly 195 to 200, or maybe even larger. Short curly hair, light brown, almost blonde.
He said, "I want your money and your car keys. I just want to get to Mexico." He had a gun, but he didn't seem nervous.
He had dark, greasy hair, heavy-rimmed glasses. He seemed friendly at first, but became very threatening.
He was a white male, 35 to 45 years old, 5'10", 180 to 200 pounds, barrel-chested, with light-colored hair in a crew cut.
The kids that saw him said he was a white male, 25 to 30 years old, crew cut, wearing glasses.
The name Zodiac Killer evokes terror, mystery, and frustration. Unlike other serial killers who eventually met their demise through capture, death, or confession, the Zodiac remains an enigma. Between the late 1960s and early 1970s, he wreaked havoc in California, claiming responsibility for at least 5 confirmed murders, though he suggested many more fell to his hand. His method was unique, not just in his brutality, but in his psychological warfare. He didn't just kill. He played games with the police, sending cryptic ciphers and letters that left investigators puzzled for decades. This video reconstructs the chilling case of the Zodiac Killer, following his crimes, his correspondence, the theories surrounding his identity, and the frustrating dead ends that prevented his capture. We delve into official reports, expert analyses, and the painstaking efforts made to decipher his messages. Additionally, we explore the impact of his crimes on law enforcement and the public, the role of media in amplifying his notoriety, and the modern efforts to uncover his identity. While the confirmed victims number at least 5, the true extent of his rampage remains unknown. Some speculate he was responsible for dozens of unsolved cases. The investigation saw multiple suspects emerge, yet none could be definitively linked to the crimes. The Zodiac seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving behind only his taunts and the fear he instilled in an entire generation. Why was he never caught? Was he a mastermind criminal who outwitted law enforcement? Or was his escape from justice merely a result of investigative missteps? With modern forensic advancements, is it possible that one of history's most elusive killers may finally be unmasked? Through a methodical breakdown of each crime, letter, and suspect, this book aims to answer the lingering questions surrounding the Zodiac Killer. Though he remains unidentified, his story is far from forgotten. As we continue to analyze his cryptic messages and psychological profile, one thing is clear: the Zodiac Killer may never have been caught, but he also never truly disappeared. A reign of terror begins. In the quiet town of Vallejo, California, 1968 was supposed to be a year of peace and prosperity. However, the events of December 20 would shatter that illusion. On that fateful night, 2 teenagers, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, were parked on a secluded lover's lane when terror struck. Without warning, an unknown assailant approached their vehicle, methodically executing them with a .22 caliber pistol. The crime was chilling in its precision. Jensen was found outside the car, having attempted to flee, while Faraday had been shot at close range. This double homicide marked the beginning of a reign of terror that would soon escalate. Though at the time, investigators saw this as an isolated incident, it would later become clear that the killer was just getting started. 7 months later, on July 4, 1969, another couple, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Majower, ambushed in a similar fashion. However, this time, there was a survivor. Majo, though gravely wounded, lived to tell the tale, providing the first known description of the man who would soon claim the name Zodiac. Then came the letters. On August 1, 1969, 3 newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, received nearly identical letters, each signed with a symbol, a crosshair-like circle. The letters provided chilling details about the murders and demanded publication, or more killings would follow. Enclosed with them were 3 ciphers, supposedly revealing the killer's identity. Thus, the Zodiac Killer was born. Authorities scrambled to make sense of the sudden wave of violence. Was this an unhinged madman, or a calculated serial murderer playing a long, twisted game? The ciphers, when partially decoded by a schoolteacher and his wife, revealed a chilling message. I like killing people because it is so much fun, yet, despite the best efforts of law enforcement, the identity of the Zodiac Killer remained shrouded in mystery. The killings continued, each with a unique signature stabbings, shootings, and taunting letters that boasted about his crimes and mocked the police for their inability to catch him. His messages often contained coded threats and bizarre demands, deepening the enigma that surrounded him. The question that haunted investigators was clear. Was this a man driven by psychopathy, an insatiable hunger for attention, or something even more sinister? The Zodiac Killer was unlike any criminal before him. As his reign of terror continued, the police, the media, and the public found themselves drawn into his twisted game. His murders were horrifying, his ciphers complex, and his ability to vanish into the shadows unnerving. This was just the beginning, the birth of the Zodiac persona. The Zodiac Killer's transformation from an unknown assailant to a self-proclaimed mastermind began with his letters. Unlike most criminals who sought to cover their tracks, the Zodiac craved attention. His letters to the press were not just admissions of guilt, but elaborate challenges, taunts directed at law enforcement and the public. The first cipher, sent alongside his initial letters, became an instant sensation. The encrypted message promised to reveal his identity, setting off a frenzy among cryptographers, both professional and amateur. When the code was finally broken by a schoolteacher and his wife, it contained a disturbing revelation. I like killing people because it is so much fun, but what it did not include was his name. With this revelation, it became evident that the Zodiac was not just a murderer, but a psychological manipulator. He understood the power of fear, and he weaponized it. The name Zodiac itself was carefully chosen, conjuring a sense of mystery, destiny, and something greater than just an ordinary killer. His symbol, a circle with a cross through it, was bold and instantly recognizable. He had crafted a persona that would endure in infamy. Each new letter added to the mythology he was creating. He mocked the police, claiming he was too clever to be caught. He provided details of the crimes that only the killer would know. He even included cryptic clues, leading authorities on a frustrating chase with no clear answers. As his fame grew, so did his boldness. On October 11, 1969, he killed cab driver Paul Stein in San Francisco, and, for the first time, an actual police sketch was made based on eyewitnesses. Yet, despite this new lead, he was still not caught. Instead, he continued to send letters, taunting investigators, offering cryptic messages, and promising more deaths. The creation of the Zodiac persona was a calculated move. He wanted to be more than just a nameless murderer. He wanted to be legendary, and in that, he succeeded. His letters, ciphers, and symbol ensured that even decades later, his crimes would still be studied, analyzed, and feared. A cunning and elusive killer. One of the most perplexing aspects of the Zodiac Killer was his ability to evade capture despite leaving behind numerous clues. Law enforcement officials, journalists, and amateur detectives have long debated whether this was due to sheer luck, calculated strategy, or incompetence on the part of investigators. The Zodiac's attacks varied in both method and location. While some serial killers followed predictable patterns, the Zodiac adapted. He changed weapons, switched locations, and modified his approach. The Lake Berryessa attack, where he wore a hood and stabbed his victims instead of shooting them, was a stark contrast to the execution-style killings he had previously committed. This unpredictability made profiling him a daunting challenge. Additionally, his ability to disappear immediately after his crimes added to the mystery. At the Paul Stein murder scene, he was seen by multiple witnesses, including police officers, yet he still managed to slip away. Some theorists believe he may have had law enforcement training, or even been an officer himself, explaining his understanding of investigative procedures and forensic countermeasures. Another factor contributing to his elusiveness was his use of cryptic communication. His letters often included misleading statements, red herrings, and false claims about his identity. Some messages hinted at crimes he may not have even committed, muddying the waters for investigators. Despite the mounting evidence against various suspects over the years, none were conclusively linked to the crimes. This led to growing frustration among law enforcement agencies and fueled the Zodiac's taunts. He continued to boast about his ability to evade capture, reveling in the chaos he had created. His calculated movements, clever misdirection, and sheer boldness solidified his place in criminal history. While many killers crave attention, few manage to manipulate the media, police, and the public as successfully as the Zodiac did. His combination of intelligence, cunning, and ruthlessness ensured that he would remain one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history. Deciphering the Zodiac ciphers. One of the most confounding elements of the Zodiac killer's reign of terror was his use of cryptographic ciphers. He didn't just kill. He wanted the world to know who he was, or at least to believe he was tauntingly revealing his identity. These ciphers, a combination of letters, symbols, and numbers, became one of the most infamous aspects of the case, drawing the attention of both amateur and professional cryptographers. The first known cipher, sent on July 31, 1969, was divided into 3 parts and mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. The killer demanded that the newspapers print the codes on their front pages, threatening more violence if his demand was not met. Within days, a schoolteacher named Donald Hardin and his wife, Betty, cracked the code, revealing a chilling message. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all." However, the most frustrating aspect of the message was that it contained no clear revelation of the Zodiac's true identity, despite his earlier claims. Subsequent ciphers followed, some of which remained unsolved for decades. The infamous 340-character cipher, sent on November 8, 1969, remained a mystery until it was finally cracked in 2020 by an international team of codebreakers. That message read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooners." Despite these breakthroughs, many of the Zodiac's cryptic messages remain unbroken, continuing to fuel speculation about their potential meanings. Were they simply a means to terrorize the public, or did they contain true clues to his identity? The study of these ciphers has fascinated generations of cryptologists, with theories ranging from the idea that they were random nonsense to the possibility that they contained hidden names, locations, or other vital information. Regardless of their intent, the ciphers cemented the Zodiac's legacy as one of the most enigmatic criminals in history. Though many of the ciphers have been cracked, key mysteries remain. Some believe that the Zodiac inserted false leads to confuse investigators, while others think the final key to his identity remains hidden in his yet unsolved codes. The Taunting Letters, a game with authorities. The Zodiac killer was not just a murderer. He was a provocateur. Unlike most criminals who tried to cover their tracks and avoid law enforcement, he actively sought their attention. Through a series of chilling letters, he mocked the police, played psychological games, and spread terror among the public. His written communications remain some of the most infamous pieces of criminal correspondence in history. The first set of Zodiac letters arrived at 3 major newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald in August 1, 1969. Each letter contained specific details about the murders, proving that the writer was indeed the killer. But more than just admissions of guilt, the letters demanded attention. The Zodiac instructed the newspapers to publish his ciphers on the front page, warning that if they did not comply, he would kill again. Law enforcement and the public were both horrified and fascinated. The letters were riddled with taunts, as if the killer was enjoying a game in which he remained untouchable. He called himself Zodiac for the first time in these letters, a name that would soon strike fear across California and beyond. One of the most haunting aspects of these messages was their tone. The Zodiac wrote in a casual, almost playful manner, treating his murders like a game of cat and mouse. In later letters, he even mocked investigators for their inability to catch him. In one such note, he included a diagram of a bomb, claiming he had constructed an explosive device that he would use to target schoolchildren. The threat sent waves of panic through the community, though no such bomb was ever found. As the letters continued, so did his theatrics. One of the most notorious letters, received on October 13, 1969, was accompanied by a blood-stained piece of the shirt belonging to cab driver Paul Stein, who had been murdered just days prior. This act was an unmistakable challenge to the police, was proving that he was the real killer and was taunting them to catch him. Zodiac's letters often included cryptic symbols, coded messages, and references to movies, pop culture, and astrology. He claimed inspiration from the 1932 film, The Most Dangerous Game, a story about a man who hunts humans for sport. Some letters ended with phrases like, "This is the Zodiac speaking," and contained his now iconic crosshair symbol, further cementing his brand of terror. Despite the extensive investigations that followed, the letters provided few tangible leads. Handwriting analysis suggested that the Zodiac was likely a well-educated individual with knowledge of ciphers and encryption, but no clear suspect emerged. The coded messages continued to baffle cryptographers, some remaining unsolved to this day. The psychological warfare waged by the Zodiac through his letters was unlike anything law enforcement had seen before. He manipulated the media, played with public fear, and crafted an identity that made him more than just a faceless killer. He became a legend. The letters also contributed to his ability to remain at large. By feeding false leads, confusing investigators, and reveling in the chaos he created, he ensured that no single narrative could pin him down. Was he a lone madman? A calculated genius? Or something else entirely? Even as the years passed, the Zodiac's letters remained a key part of the investigation. Some believe that his later messages were written by copycats, while others insist that they hold the final key to unmasking the killer. The question remains, were the Zodiac's letters a carefully planned strategy to mislead authorities, or were they simply the work of a narcissistic killer reveling in his own infamy? As forensic technology advances, perhaps the answers lie hidden within the ink of those very letters. Terror in California. The confirmed victims. While the Zodiac killer taunted the police and the media with his cryptic letters and ciphers, it was his brutal crimes that truly cemented his legacy as one of America's most infamous murderers. The officially confirmed victims of the Zodiac all met tragic fates, their lives cut short in acts of violence that seemed both premeditated and random. These cases, though undoubtedly linked by forensic evidence and the killer's own admissions, are believed by some to be just a fraction of his total body count. Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, December 20, 1968. The first confirmed Zodiac attack occurred on a quiet, remote road in Benicia, California. Betty Lou Jensen, 16, and David Faraday, 17, were high school sweethearts out on a date when they were ambushed. The attacker approached their vehicle and shot Faraday once in the head at close range. Jensen attempted to flee, but was shot 5 times in the back before she could get far. The killer left behind no evidence of robbery or sexual assault, leading investigators to suspect a calculated execution rather than a crime of opportunity. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau, July 4, 1969, on Independence Day. Just months after his first attack, the Zodiac struck again at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. Darlene Ferrin, 22, and her companion, Michael Mageau, 19, were sitting in a parked car when they were suddenly attacked. A man approached with a flashlight, opened fire with a 9mm pistol, and then walked away, only to return moments later and shoot them again. Ferrin was killed instantly, while Mageau survived with severe wounds. It was this attack that first revealed the Zodiac's obsession with taunting authorities. Approximately 40 minutes after the shooting, a man called the Vallejo Police Department from a payphone, claiming responsibility for both the Blue Rock Springs attack and the previous murders of Jensen and Faraday. He even gave the location of the crime scene before hanging up. His voice was calm, devoid of emotion, a chilling preview of the calculated cruelty he would later exhibit in his letters. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, September 27, 1969. Unlike the previous shootings, this attack took place in broad daylight near the shores of Lake Berryessa, Napa County. Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, were relaxing on a secluded hillside when a masked man, dressed in an eerie black executioner-style hood, approached them. He brandished a gun and claimed to be an escaped convict who needed their car. After tying the couple up with pre-cut lengths of rope, the killer suddenly produced a knife and began stabbing them in a frenzied attack. He stabbed Hartnell 6 times and Shepard 10 before calmly walking away. Before leaving the scene, he used a black marker to scrawl his now infamous sympathy crosshair along with the dates of his previous crimes on Hartnell's car door. Miraculously, Hartnell survived the attack and was able to provide critical details to law enforcement. Shepard, however, succumbed to her injuries days later in the hospital. Later that evening, the Zodiac called the Napa County Sheriff's Office, once again taking credit for the crime and providing its exact location. Paul Stine, October 11, 1969. Unlike his previous attacks on couples in isolated locations, the murder of Paul Stine, 29, was different. Stine, a cab driver in San Francisco, was shot once in the head at point-blank range in a seemingly random killing. Witnesses saw a man wiping down the taxi before walking away calmly. Initially thought to be a robbery, the case took a dark turn when the Zodiac himself claimed responsibility in a letter mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle. To prove he was the killer, he included a torn piece of Stine's bloody shirt. What made this crime particularly chilling was that the Zodiac was almost caught. 2 police officers, responding to the crime scene, actually encountered a man matching the suspect's description walking nearby. Due to a miscommunication, they were instructed to look for a black male suspect, allowing the real Zodiac to slip away into the night. This blunder remains one of the most frustrating errors in the case's history. A killer who craved infamy. These 5 murders are the only confirmed victims attributed to the Zodiac killer. However, in his letters, he claimed responsibility for at least 37 killings, leaving investigators questioning whether he was inflating his body count to instill further fear, or if more victims truly remained undiscovered. Many experts believe the Zodiac was responsible for additional unsolved cases, particularly ones that bore similarities to his confirmed killings. Some of these cases, while lacking definitive proof, still carry eerie connections: random shootings, cryptic phone calls, and anonymous taunts directed at law enforcement. Despite the mounting evidence and confessions, the Zodiac's identity remained elusive. His ability to kill in different locations, switch between shooting and stabbing, and then vanish without a trace baffled investigator. Each attack seemed meticulously planned, yet he never left behind forensic evidence that could lead to his capture. His confirmed victims were not just statistics in a true crime case. They were young lives full of promise, cruelly cut short by a man who found pleasure in terrorizing an entire region. And with each attack, the Zodiac grew bolder, cementing his place in criminal history as the killer who refused to be caught. The question remains, were these truly the only victims, or were there many more who never received justice? Unsolved cases and possible connections. While the Zodiac killer is officially linked to 5 confirmed murders, he claimed responsibility for 37 killings in his letters. Many investigators and amateur sleuths believe that the Zodiac was responsible for several unsolved cases, some of which bore striking similarities to his known crimes. These cases span multiple years, locations, and methods, raising the possibility that the true extent of the Zodiac's terror remains unknown. The 1963 Domingos Edwards murders, one of the earliest cases suspected to be connected to the Zodiac, is the double homicide of high school sweethearts, Robert Domingos, 18, and Linda Edwards, 17. On June 4, 1963, the couple was enjoying a senior ditch day at Gaviota State Beach in Santa Barbara County when they were brutally attacked. The killer attempted to bind them with pre-cut lengths of ropey and Erie, parallel to the Lake Berryessa attack years later. When the couple attempted to escape, they were shot multiple times with a .22 caliber rifle. Their bodies were later found inside a makeshift shack where the killer had attempted to set it on fire. Though never officially attributed to the Zodiac, the methodical nature of the crime, the use of a small caliber firearm, and the presence of prepared bindings have led some to suspect that this may have been one of his early attacks. The 1966 murder of Cherry Jo Bates. One of the most frequently debated potential Zodiac killings is the murder of 18-year-old college student Cherry Jo Bates on October 30, 1966, in Riverside, California. Bates had spent the evening studying in her campus library before returning to her car, only to find it disabled. Someone had tampered with her vehicle's ignition wiring. As she attempted to leave, she was ambushed, dragged into a dark alley, and brutally stabbed multiple times. She also had defensive wounds, indicating a struggle. 1 month later, an anonymous typed letter was sent to the Riverside Police Department and the Riverside Press Enterprise, taunting authorities and boasting about the murder. The letter was signed with the initial Z, leading some to believe this was an early work of the Zodiac. Additionally, a poem found on a desk at Riverside City College, seemingly written by the killer, described the thrill of murder in chilling detail. Years later, the Zodiac himself referenced Bates in a letter to the Los Angeles Times, cryptically writing, "She was not the first, and she will not be the last." While Riverside police have never conclusively linked Bates's murder to the Zodiac, the similarities in style, language, and behavior remain compelling. The Kathleen Johns incident, March 22, 1970. Unlike most of the Zodiac's confirmed crimes, which resulted in death, the case of Kathleen Johns stands out as a terrifying encounter that nearly turned fatal. Johns, a 22-year-old pregnant woman, was driving along Highway 132 near Modesto, California, when a man in another vehicle signaled that something was wrong with her car. When she pulled over, the man offered to help, but instead disabled her vehicle further. He then offered her a ride, which she reluctantly accepted. What followed was a 2-hour nightmare. The driver, whom Johns later identified as resembling the Zodiac sketch, drove aimlessly through rural roads, ignoring her pleas to be let go. She eventually managed to escape with her infant daughter when he stopped at an intersection. Hours later, after reaching the police station, she was horrified to see a sketch of the Zodiac killer, her abductor's face, staring back at her. The Zodiac later seemed to claim responsibility for the encounter in a letter, but because there was no physical attack, the case remains classified as a suspected Zodiac crime rather than a confirmed one. The Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders, 1972, 1973. Between 1972 and 1973, a series of murders took place in Santa Rosa, California, where several young women were found murdered after hitchhiking. The victims were often dumped in remote areas, and some bore signs of strangulation, similar to an unconfirmed Zodiac claim of killing with rope. Though these murders happened after the Zodiac's last confirmed attack, some theorists believe he may have changed his methods or continued to kill under a different pattern. The Santa Rosa Hitchhiker murders remain unsolved, and while there is no definitive link to the Zodiac, their proximity to his known killing ground has fueled speculation. Could the Zodiac have been more than one person? Some theories suggest that the Zodiac may not have acted alone. Certain researchers argue that multiple individuals could have been involved, either as copycats or as part of a coordinated effort to spread fear. This theory is fueled by the varying descriptions given by eyewitnesses, the changing crime scenes, and the wide geographical spread of the suspected cases. Others believe that the Zodiac may have continued killing, but refined his methods to avoid detection. The fact that he seemingly disappeared after 1974 remains one of the greatest mysteries in criminal history. The unanswered questions? With so many unsolved cases and potential links to the Zodiac, the true scope of his crimes may never be known. Was he responsible for the murders in Santa Barbara and Riverside? Did he evolve into another form of killer? Or did he simply vanish into obscurity? The uncertainty surrounding these additional crimes only deepens the enigma of the Zodiac killer. Even decades later, investigators and true crime enthusiasts continue to examine cold cases, hoping to find that missing link that could finally reveal the true extent of his reign of terror. One thing is certain: whether the confirmed cases are the entirety of his crimes or just the tip of the iceberg, the Zodiac killer's legacy remains one of the most haunting and perplexing mysteries in American criminal history. Eyewitness accounts and survivor testimonies. Despite the Zodiac killer's cunning and ability to evade capture, not all of his victims perished. A few survived his attacks, and some witnesses caught brief glimpses of him before he disappeared into the night. Their accounts provided crucial insights into the killer's appearance, behavior, and tactics. While these testimonies helped shape the police's investigation, they also introduced inconsistencies and further deepened the mystery surrounding his identity. Michael Mageau, the survivor of Blue Rock Springs. On July 4, 1969, Michael Mageau, then 19 years old, was sitting in a parked car with Darlene Ferrin when the Zodiac struck. After being shot multiple times, Mageau miraculously survived and later provided one of the first descriptions of the killer. He described the attacker as a heavy-set man with short, light-colored hair, possibly wearing glasses. However, his account was limited due to the attack happening at night and his severe injuries. Mageau also recalled that the shooter initially walked away after the first round of gunfire, only to return and fire additional shots to ensure his victims were dead. His description helped investigators develop an early composite sketch of the Zodiac, though it was not conclusive. Brian Hartnell, the Lake Berryessa survivor. One of the most terrifying and detailed encounters with the Zodiac occurred on September 27, 1969, when Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were ambushed at Lake Berryessa. Unlike previous attacks, the Zodiac wore a theatrical disguise, black hooded mask with clip-on sunglasses and his signature crosshair symbol on the chest. Hartnell recounted how the killer calmly approached them, brandishing a gun, and claimed to be an escaped convict who needed their car. After tying them up with pre-cut lengths of rope, the Zodiac suddenly switched tactics, pulling out a knife and repeatedly stabbing both victims. Despite suffering multiple stab wounds, Hartnell survived and provided critical details about the Zodiac's appearance, demeanor, and unique costume. His testimony reinforced the theory that the Zodiac was a methodical and deliberate killer, carefully planning his crimes and even altering his approach. Kathleen Johns, the woman who escaped. On March 22, 1970, Kathleen Johns had an encounter with a man who may have been the Zodiac killer. While driving with her infant daughter along Highway 132 near Modesto, she was tricked into stopping by a driver who claimed something was wrong with her car. Once she accepted his offer for a ride, she realized she was in danger. For nearly 2 hours, the man drove aimlessly through dark roads, ignoring her questions and refusing to let her out. Eventually, she seized an opportunity to escape with her baby when the car slowed at an intersection. When she later reported the incident, she was shown a composite sketch of the Zodiac and immediately identified him as her abductor. However, some investigators doubted whether the Zodiac was truly responsible for her kidnapping, as there was no confirmed attack. Eyewitnesses at the Paulstein murder scene. Unlike previous attacks on couples in secluded locations, the Zodiac's killing of cab driver Paul Stein on October 11, 1969, took place in the bustling Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. Several eyewitnesses, including a group of teenagers, saw the suspect casually walking away from the crime scene. They described him as a white male, around 5'8" to 6'0", tall, stocky, and wearing glasses. Most notably, 2 police officers responding to the crime scene encountered a man matching the Zodiac's description just minutes after the murder. However, due to a miscommunication, they had been given incorrect information to look for a black suspect, allowing the Zodiac to slip away. The challenges of eyewitness testimonies. While survivor accounts and eyewitness reports played a crucial role in shaping the Zodiac investigation, they also introduced contradictions. Some described him as having dark hair, while others claimed it was light-colored. Some believed he was clean-shaven, while others noted facial hair. These discrepancies made it difficult to create an exact profile of the killer. Additionally, the Zodiac's ability to adapt and change his approach, sometimes wearing a mask, other times blending into crowds, made it even harder to pin down a consistent description. Many criminologists believe the Zodiac was acutely aware of how unreliable eyewitness testimonies could be. By altering his appearance and mannerisms, he may have deliberately manipulated witnesses to create confusion. The psychological impact on survivors. For those who lived through the Zodiac's attacks, the trauma endured for a lifetime. Michael Mageau struggled with survivor's guilt, knowing that Darlene Ferrin did not make it. Brian Hartnell dedicated years to cooperating with investigators, reliving the horror of that day at Lake Berryessa. Kathleen Johns was left haunted by the experience of being at the mercy of a man who might have been one of history's most notorious killers. Despite their bravery in sharing their accounts, the Zodiac remained elusive. Their testimonies provided crucial pieces of the puzzle, but not enough to unmask him. The survivor stories serve as chilling reminders that the Zodiac was not just a legend, he was a real predator who left behind scars that never fully healed. As the investigation continued, law enforcement relied on these testimonies while also turning to forensic evidence, behavioral profiling, and cryptographic analysis in their hunt for the killer. Would their accounts eventually help solve the case? Or would the Zodiac's ability to manipulate and deceive keep him forever in the shadows? Media frenzy and public fear. The Zodiac killer was not just a murderer, was a master manipulator of the media. From the moment he began his reign of terror, he understood how to use the press to amplify his presence, spread fear, and mock the authorities. The way he inserted himself into the public consciousness made him one of the most infamous criminals in American history. The role of newspapers in the Zodiac case. The Zodiac's first letters, sent on August 1, 1969, demanded publication in 3 major newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each letter contained a piece of an encrypted cipher that, when combined, would supposedly reveal the killer's identity. The newspapers faced an ethical dilemma: should they comply with the demands of a serial killer? Ultimately, they decided to publish the ciphers, fearing that if they did not, more innocent lives would be lost. This decision set a precedent. The Zodiac had established a direct line of communication with the media, and he would use it to his advantage. As the letters continued, he taunted police and journalists alike. He provided details about his crimes that only the killer would know, proving his authenticity. He also made chilling threats, such as promising to attack a school bus and pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. This terrifying message led to heightened security for children across California and further cemented his status as a menace. How the media shaped public perception. The extensive media coverage of the Zodiac's crimes had a profound impact on the public. Unlike previous serial killers, who operated in relative obscurity, the Zodiac craved attention and got it. His letters, cryptograms, and chilling declarations made for sensational headlines. For months, his crimes dominated newspapers and TV broadcasts. The people of Northern California lived in fear, unsure where he would strike next. Some residents took precautions, avoiding remote areas or changing their routines. Others became amateur sleuths, convinced they could crack the Zodiac's ciphers or identify him in their own communities. Movies and pop culture also began incorporating elements of the Zodiac case, further embedding his legend into American society. His eerie persona and cryptic messages made him a figure of both terror and fascination. The police versus the Zodiac in the public eye. As the Zodiac continued to elude capture, public frustration grew. The killer mocked law enforcement in his letters, claiming that they were incompetent and that he was always one step ahead. He seemed to enjoy the game of cat and mouse, feeding off the media attention and law enforcement's inability to stop him. One of the most significant moments in the media battle came on October 22, 1969, when famed lawyer Melvin Belli appeared on a live television broadcast with Jim Dunbar's morning show. The Zodiac had previously sent a letter stating that he wanted to communicate, and during the show, someone claiming to be the Zodiac called in multiple times. The caller, who identified himself as Sam, claimed he needed help and wanted Belli to represent him. However, the call was later dismissed as likely coming from a mentally ill person rather than the real Zodiac. Despite this, the broadcast heightened public intrigue and made it clear just how deeply the killer had embedded himself in the public psyche. Copycats and hoaxes. With the Zodiac case making headlines across the country, it was inevitable that copycats and hoaxers would emerge. Law enforcement received numerous letters from people claiming to be the Zodiac, many of which were dismissed as fakes. Several crimes were initially suspected to be linked to the Zodiac, but were later proven to be unrelated. Some individuals even confessed to being the Zodiac, though their claims were quickly debunked. The chaos created by these false leads made it even harder for police to sift through legitimate evidence and track the real killer. The psychological toll on the public. The prolonged uncertainty surrounding the Zodiac case had a profound psychological effect on the people of California. Fear gripped the Bay Area, with many residents altering their behaviors to avoid becoming his next victims. Some stopped taking late-night drives, while others refused to go to parks or isolated locations. Parents were especially fearful, as the Zodiac's threats against schoolchildren made the prospect of sending kids to school a nerve-wracking experience. Bus drivers and teachers were placed on high alert, and security measures were tightened in multiple districts. The Zodiac's ability to manipulate public perception and spread terror without being caught is what sets him apart from many other serial killers. While others relied solely on their crimes to make a name for themselves, the Zodiac used the media as his stage, ensuring that his name would never be forgotten. Did the media help or hinder the investigation? The extensive media coverage of the Zodiac case was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it kept the case in the public eye, ensuring that law enforcement had a constant stream of tips and leads. On the other hand, the media's eagerness to publish Zodiac's letters may have fed his ego and encouraged him to continue killing. By giving the Zodiac a platform, newspapers may have inadvertently allowed him to enjoy the notoriety he so desperately sought. Some experts argue that had the media ignored him, he may have lost interest and stopped. Others believe that the media coverage ultimately helped keep people informed and on alert, possibly preventing more deaths. Regardless of its impact, the Zodiac case remains a prime example of how media can shape public perception of crime. His ability to insert himself into headlines and fuel widespread paranoia is one of the key reasons he is still remembered today. The legacy of the Zodiac in popular culture, even decades after his last confirmed letter, the Zodiac Killer remains a pop culture phenomenon. Books, documentaries, movies, and TV shows have continued to dissect his crimes, keeping his legend alive. The 2007 film Zodiac, directed by David Fincher, introduced a new generation to the mystery and reignited interest in the case. The question remains, did the Zodiac ever stop killing, or did he simply fade into the background, satisfied with the terror he had created? As the media fascination continues, the search for answers remains as active as ever. Police investigations and frustrations. Despite the mounting evidence, numerous eyewitness testimonies, and taunting letters, the Zodiac Killer remained an elusive ghost in the world of criminal investigations. Law enforcement agencies across multiple jurisdictions struggled to piece together a comprehensive case that could lead to an arrest. The case was marred by jurisdictional challenges, lack of forensic technology at the time, and the killer's ability to seemingly vanish without a trace after each attack. The initial response: Vallejo and San Francisco police departments. After the first confirmed Zodiac attacks in 1968 and 1969, police departments in Vallejo and San Francisco launched full-scale investigations. Detectives worked tirelessly to examine physical evidence, question potential witnesses, and analyze the letters that began arriving in newspaper offices. However, a major challenge quickly emerged. The Zodiac committed crimes across different counties, which meant multiple agencies had to cooperate, something that was not as streamlined in the 1960s as it is today. Despite this, investigators gathered vital evidence. The 9mm bullet casings from the Blue Rock Springs attack matched those found at Lake Herman Road. The handwriting in the letters appeared consistent across multiple communications. A composite sketch from witnesses at the Paul Stine murder scene provided a visual of the suspect. However, none of these pieces of evidence were enough to make an arrest. The forensic limitations of the time. One of the biggest obstacles investigators faced was the lack of advanced forensic technology. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, DNA analysis did not exist, and fingerprinting was still in its infancy. The Zodiac's crimes left behind few clues: no clear fingerprints, no usable fibers, and no concrete DNA samples. The bloody piece of Paul Stine's shirt that the Zodiac mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle was one of the most valuable pieces of evidence. If modern DNA techniques had been available, investigators might have been able to extract a viable sample. Instead, they were left with a taunting message and a dead-end case. Missed opportunities. The Zodiac slips away. Perhaps one of the most frustrating moments in the investigation was the encounter between police officers and the Zodiac after the Paul Stine murder. Responding to reports of a shooting, officers Donald Fouque and Eric Zelms spotted a man matching the suspect's description walking away from the crime scene. Due to a miscommunication in the police dispatch, they were mistakenly informed to look for a black male suspect instead of a white male. As a result, the officers did not detain the man. Later, when the correct suspect description was clarified, it was too late. He had vanished. This was one of the closest instances in which the Zodiac might have been caught. The FBI's involvement due to the Zodiac's continued threats and interstate communications, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, was eventually brought into the case. They compiled a detailed case file, analyzed the cryptograms, and worked with local law enforcement. However, the Zodiac's careful avoidance of leaving behind substantial physical evidence made it difficult for them to build a concrete profile. Over time, the Zodiac's letters became more erratic, and the FBI struggled to determine whether all of them were authentic. Some appeared to be written by copycats, further complicating the investigation. The frustration of false leads and hoaxes. The Zodiac investigation was plagued with hoaxes, false leads, and individuals seeking attention by claiming to be the killer. Law enforcement received numerous letters, phone calls, and tips from people who either falsely confessed or provided misleading information. One such instance occurred during a televised broadcast featuring attorney Melvin Belly, in which a man claiming to be the Zodiac called in multiple times. The individual, later determined to be mentally ill, was not the real killer, but the incident highlighted how desperate authorities were for answers. False confessions also emerged, leading police to waste resources chasing down dead ends. The Zodiac case became one of the most publicized unsolved crimes in history, and as with any high-profile case, it attracted a wave of misinformation that hindered legitimate investigative efforts. Theories and suspects. Who was the Zodiac? As the investigation dragged on, several suspects emerged, some of whom were highly plausible. However, none could be definitively linked to the crimes due to the lack of concrete forensic evidence. One of the most well-known suspects, Arthur Lee Allen, was extensively investigated. He was a convicted child molester who had been in the vicinity of some of the Zodiac attacks. Multiple people also claimed he had made suspicious comments related to the murders. However, no physical evidence ever directly connected him to the killings. Other suspects included individuals with military backgrounds, people with cryptographic knowledge, and even high-profile figures like newspaper columnist Paul Avery, who received a personal threat from the Zodiac himself. Each lead was pursued diligently, yet none resulted in an arrest. The investigation fizzles out. By the mid-1970s, the Zodiac's letters and confirmed murders had stopped, and law enforcement agencies found themselves with a cold case. Despite years of effort, they were no closer to unmasking the killer than they had been at the start of the investigation. Many detectives who worked on the case later expressed their frustration, believing that if modern forensic tools had been available, the Zodiac might have been identified. Despite multiple re-examinations of the evidence over the decades, no breakthrough has ever been made that definitively proves the killer's identity. Could the Zodiac have been caught? Hindsight suggests that certain key moments might have led to the Zodiac's capture. If officers Fuchs and Zelms had stopped the suspect near the Stein crime scene, if modern DNA analysis had been available to examine the letters and shirt fragment, if law enforcement agencies had been able to collaborate more efficiently across jurisdictions. Despite these frustrations, the case remains active. Even decades later, detectives, amateur sleuths, and forensic experts continue to search for answers. The question remains, did the Zodiac simply stop killing, or did he disappear under a new identity, forever escaping justice? The prime suspects and dead ends. Throughout the decades-long investigation into the Zodiac killer, several individuals emerged as strong suspects. Some were closely scrutinized by law enforcement, while others became the focus of independent investigators and amateur sleuths. Despite compelling circumstantial evidence in some cases, no definitive proof ever linked any of these men to the Zodiac's crimes. The result was a series of frustrating dead ends, leaving one of history's most infamous killers unidentified. Arthur Lee Allen, the most famous suspect. One of the most widely discussed Zodiac suspects was Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester and former schoolteacher. He became a primary focus for investigators after several suspicious incidents and coincidences linked him to the case. Key evidence against Allen He allegedly told a friend he wanted to create a criminal persona similar to the Zodiac before the killer's first known attack. He owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch, which featured the same crosshair symbol the killer used in his letters. He lived near the areas where the Zodiac operated and had knowledge of cryptography and ciphers. His former acquaintances claimed he made disturbing comments about hunting people and wanting to kill schoolchildren. A search of his home uncovered a collection of weapons and cryptographic materials. However, despite these suspicious details, no forensic evidence ever linked Allen to the crimes. Handwriting experts concluded that his writing did not match the Zodiac's letters, and his DNA did not match samples found on stamps used by the killer. Though he remained a top suspect until his death in 1992, no direct evidence ever confirmed he was the Zodiac. Lawrence Kane. A viable alternative? Another suspect, Lawrence Kane, was identified through eyewitness testimony and circumstantial evidence. He was known to have a history of stalking women and had an extensive criminal record. Reasons Kane was suspected. A former police officer claimed Kane closely resembled the composite sketches of the Zodiac. Kathleen Johns, who was allegedly abducted by the Zodiac in 1970, later identified Kane's photograph as her attacker. He had documented psychological issues following a traumatic brain injury, which some theorists believed could explain the Zodiac's erratic behavior. He had ties to the Lake Tahoe area, where a potential Zodiac-linked disappearance occurred. Donna Lass, 1970. Despite these compelling factors, no physical evidence or concrete proof ever connected Kane to the Zodiac's crimes. Rick Marshall, and the film theory Rick Marshall, a projectionist and film enthusiast, was another name that surfaced in Zodiac investigations. Some theorists speculated that the Zodiac's cryptic letters and symbols might have been inspired by old movies and ciphers used in the film industry. Suspicious factors regarding Marshall. He worked with film reels, leading some to believe he may have hidden messages in his letters inspired by movies. His handwriting had similarities to the Zodiac's. He lived in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time of the killings. However, much of the speculation surrounding Marshall came from amateur investigations rather than concrete law enforcement findings. No substantial evidence tied him to the Zodiac, and he was never charged. Other suspects and wild theories over the years, a wide range of individuals were proposed as possible Zodiac suspects, including some bizarre and far-fetched theories. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Some theorists speculated that Kaczynski, who had an affinity for cryptography and sent taunting letters, could have been the Zodiac before turning to bombings. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to the Zodiac crimes. Bruce Davis, Manson family member. Some researchers considered the possibility that a member of the Manson family, such as Bruce Davis, might have been involved. Again, no definitive link was ever established, a secret group or multiple killers. Some believe the Zodiac may not have been a single person but a group of individuals working together to create a legend. The DNA disappointment. In the early 2000s, investigators attempted to extract DNA from the Zodiac's letters, using modern forensic techniques to compare it to known suspects. When they tested DNA from the back of the stamps and envelopes, it did not match Arthur Lee Allen or any other prominent suspects. However, some experts argue that the DNA may not have belonged to the Zodiac himself. He could have had someone else lick the stamps. This development, while eliminating some suspects, added to the frustration. If the Zodiac had left behind any DNA, it remained out of reach for law enforcement. Why was the Zodiac never caught? Despite having multiple strong suspects, police never made an arrest in the Zodiac case. Several factors contributed to this. 1. The killer's carefulness. The Zodiac was methodical and avoided leaving clear forensic evidence at crime scenes. 2. Lack of coordination. Law enforcement agencies across different counties and cities did not always share information effectively. 3. Evolving crime patterns. The Zodiac did not always use the same methods, making it harder to connect crimes. 4. Forensic limitations. Advanced forensic tools, such as DNA analysis, were not available at the time of the killings. 5. Misdirection. The Zodiac may have sent misleading letters or made false claims about additional victims to confuse investigators. a case that remains open. Despite decades of investigation, no suspect has ever been definitively identified as the Zodiac. Theories continue to emerge, and advances in forensic science still offer hope that a breakthrough might one day occur. The Zodiac killer case remains one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in criminal history. The prime suspects have all had compelling evidence against them, yet none were conclusively proven to be the killer. The frustration of law enforcement, combined with the public's enduring fascination, ensures that the search for answers will continue. Could the Zodiac's identity still be uncovered, or will his true identity remain an enigma forever? Theories about the Zodiac's identity. The Zodiac killer has remained one of the most infamous unidentified criminals in history, fueling countless theories about who he might have been. From logical deductions based on forensic evidence to wild conspiracies involving multiple killers, speculation has surrounded the case for decades. In this chapter, we explore the most prevalent theories regarding the Zodiac's true identity. Theory 1. The Zodiac was a highly intelligent, lone psychopath. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the Zodiac was a highly intelligent sociopath who operated alone. His detailed ciphers, cryptic letters, and ability to evade capture suggest a meticulous planner with a deep understanding of law enforcement procedures. Psychologists have suggested that the Zodiac exhibited traits of narcissism and sadism, reveling in the fear he created. His desire for notoriety, demonstrated by his letters to the press, aligns with serial killers who crave infamy rather than simply satisfying a violent impulse. This theory explains why he enjoyed playing games with investigators, but also why he may have eventually stopped either losing interest or realizing he was at greater risk of being caught. Theory 2. The Zodiac had a military or law enforcement background. Several pieces of evidence suggest that the Zodiac may have had some form of military or law enforcement training. His knowledge of firearms and execution-style killings, his ability to remain undetected despite multiple police investigations, the boot prints found at the Lake Berryessa crime scene, which matched a type of military-style footwear, his ciphers, which contained codes resembling those used in military cryptography. If the Zodiac was a former or active duty serviceman, it would explain his strategic approach and careful planning. It could also explain why he was never caught. If he had inside knowledge of police procedures, he may have known how to avoid detection. Theory 3. The Zodiac was a teacher or academic. Some theorists believe that the Zodiac may have been an educator, particularly someone with expertise in cryptography or mathematics. His letters contained complex word patterns, coded messages, and references to literature. His command of language and structured writing style suggests he was well educated, possibly a professor or someone working in academia. Furthermore, his apparent obsession with symbols and coded communication aligns with someone interested in cryptology or linguistic studies. Some researchers speculate that he could have been a university professor or researcher living in the Bay Area at the time of the killings. Theory 4. The Zodiac was a convicted criminal who was later incarcerated or died. One reason the Zodiac killings may have stopped is that he was arrested for an unrelated crime or died before he could be caught. Some of the strongest Zodiac suspects, including Arthur Lee Allen, had criminal records that led them into prison. If the Zodiac had been arrested for an unrelated charges as sexual assault, burglary, or another violent crime, his ability to continue killing would have been interrupted. Another possibility is that the Zodiac died, whether from natural causes or an accident. Given the fact that his letters abruptly stopped in the mid-1970s, some believe he may have met an untimely end before he could be identified. Theory 5. The Zodiac was more than one person. A more controversial theory is that the Zodiac was not a single person, but a group of individuals working together. Some suggest that different people wrote the letters, committed the murders, and created the ciphers, making it more difficult to identify a single suspect. This theory argues that the inconsistencies in eyewitness reports, such as varying descriptions of his appearance, might indicate multiple perpetrators. However, this theory remains largely speculative, as there is no solid evidence suggesting more than one person was responsible for the crimes. Theory 6. The Zodiac became the Golden State Killer. Some true crime enthusiasts have speculated that the Zodiac Killer and the Golden State Killer, also known as Joseph James DeAngelo, could have been the same person. Both killers operated in California during overlapping time periods, and both taunted police and left behind cryptic clues. However, this theory is largely dismissed by experts, as the methods used by the Golden State Killer, home invasions, sexual assaults, and stalking victims were quite different from the Zodiac's public attacks and letter-writing campaign. Theory 7. The Zodiac is still alive and living in obscurity. Given the timeline of the Zodiac crimes, it is possible that the killer, if still alive, would be in his late 70s or 80s today. Some theorists believe that he may have quietly integrated into society, avoiding suspicion while following his own case in the media. If he was truly as intelligent and strategic as he appeared to be, he may have known exactly when to stop before law enforcement could close in. This would mean that the Zodiac may still be alive, reading about his own crimes from the comfort of anonymity. Will we ever know the truth? Despite decades of investigation, the Zodiac Killer's identity remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history. Advances in forensic science, particularly DNA analysis, continue to offer hope that the case may one day be solved. Investigators have re-examined old evidence, running new tests in the hopes of uncovering a conclusive answer. As of today, no single theory has been proven definitively, and the Zodiac's true identity remains an enigma. Whether he was a lone wolf, a former military operative, a convicted felon, or someone who simply disappeared, his crimes continue to haunt the public imagination. The question remains, is there a final clue waiting to be uncovered, or will the Zodiac Killer's true identity forever remain unknown? The last known communication and disappearance. For years, the Zodiac Killer taunted authorities, sending cryptic letters, ciphers, and threats. His correspondences were a blend of confession, mockery, and deliberate misdirection. However, as suddenly as he appeared, he seemed to fade into obscurity. The final confirmed communication from the Zodiac remains a subject of debate. Was it truly the last message, or did he continue under the radar? The last confirmed letter, January 29, 1974. The last widely accepted Zodiac letter was postmarked on January 29, 1974, and sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. Unlike his earlier messages, which contained detailed descriptions of his crimes, taunts directed at law enforcement, and cryptic ciphers, this letter was shorter and stranger in tone. The letter read, "Dear Editor, I saw and think The Exorcist was the best satirical comedy that I have ever seen. Signed, yours truly." He plunged himself into the billowy wave, and an echo arose from the suicide's grave. Titana. Hooray for the red, white, and blue. The letter referenced The Exorcist, a film that had been released just weeks earlier. It also included a quote resembling a passage from The Mikado, a 19th century operetta that the Zodiac had referenced in previous letters. However, what made this letter particularly unusual was the absence of his signature crosshair symbol, and any direct claims of responsibility for new crimes. Was this the true end? After this letter, no more confirmed Zodiac correspondences were received. While numerous letters surfaced in later years, many were dismissed as hoaxes. The disappearance of the Zodiac's communications left law enforcement and the public with more questions than answers. Did he stop killing? Or did he simply stop writing? Did he die? Or become incarcerated for another crime? Did he fear being caught and decide to fade into obscurity? While many serial killers crave attention, others vanish after their killing sprees for a variety of reasons. Some lose interest, others fear capture, and some may face life-changing circumstances that prevent them from continuing their crimes. Possible reasons for the Zodiac's disappearance. 1. He was arrested for an unrelated crime. Some theorists believe the Zodiac may have been caught and imprisoned under a different identity for another offense. If he was convicted of a crime unrelated to the Zodiac killings, he may have spent the rest of his life behind bars, unable to continue his spree. 2. He died before he could be identified. Another possibility is that the Zodiac passed away due to illness, an accident, or other circumstances. Many of the strongest Zodiac suspects, including Arthur Lee Allen, died before DNA testing could definitively prove or disprove their involvement. 3. He simply moved on. Unlike most serial killers, who have a clear compulsion to continue killing, The Zodiac seemed to enjoy the notoriety and power he wielded over the media and the police. Some believe he may have decided to stop, either because the risk of capture became too great, or because he found other ways to satisfy his desires for control and psychological manipulation. 4. He continued killing. Under a new persona O, one of the most chilling possibilities is that the Zodiac never stopped, but instead changed his methods or location. Some researchers speculate that the Zodiac could be linked to other unsolved murders outside California, but without definitive forensic evidence, these claims remain speculative. The hoax letters and the continued mystery. After 1974, various letters surfaced claiming to be from the Zodiac, but most were dismissed as hoaxes. One of the most notable was a 1978 letter, which initially fooled investigators but was later deemed a fake. The handwriting and language differed from the confirmed Zodiac letters, suggesting it was written by an imposter. Other letters in the 1980s and 1990s claimed the Zodiac was still active, but none provided verifiable details about unsolved crimes. Some amateur sleuths believe that the Zodiac may have sent additional letters under different names or from new locations, but without confirmation, these theories remain in the realm of speculation. Did the Zodiac leave one final clue? While the last confirmed letter contained no direct threats or claims of responsibility, some researchers believe the Zodiac may have embedded a hidden message within it. The phrase referencing the Mikado and the Exorcist may hold clues that have yet to be deciphered. Some have even speculated that the Zodiac deliberately left an unfinished puzzle-on final cryptic message that could hold the key to his identity. If true, this would align with his pattern of psychological games and manipulation, a killer who disappeared, but never faded away. Even though the Zodiac ceased communication, his legend never faded. The public's fascination with the case ensured that investigators, journalists, and amateur detectives would continue hunting for answers decades later. The fact that his final letter lacked his usual bravado and threats has led to endless speculation. Was he preparing to vanish? Was he signaling that he was done? Or was it simply another act of deception? As forensic science advances, the Zodiac case remains open, with law enforcement still hoping for a breakthrough. But as of today, the Zodiac's last known words remain a mystery, just like his true identity. Did the Zodiac walk away from his crimes forever? Or is the final piece of the puzzle still waiting to be uncovered? The legacy of the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer was not just a murderer, was a manipulator of fear, a ghost who haunted law enforcement, and a figure who changed the way the public perceived crime. More than 50 years after his last known letter, his impact continues to resonate in popular culture, criminal investigations, and psychological studies of serial killers. His legacy is one of terror, mystery, and an unsettling reminder that some of the most notorious criminals in history can evade justice indefinitely. How the Zodiac changed criminal investigations. Before the Zodiac's reign of terror, serial killers were often viewed as deranged individuals who acted impulsively. The Zodiac, however, shattered this notion. His methodical approach, coded messages, and ability to evade capture suggested an intelligent, calculating predator who was always one step ahead of law enforcement. Some of the ways the Zodiac case impacted criminal investigations include improved interjurisdictional communication. The Zodiac committed crimes across multiple counties, which at the time created jurisdictional challenges. The failures in coordination between different police departments highlighted the need for better communication in high-profile cases. Increased focus on psychological profiling. The Zodiac's letters demonstrated an unusual level of narcissism and a desire to manipulate public perception. His case contributed to the advancement of criminal profiling techniques used to understand serial offenders. Advancements in forensic science. Although the Zodiac case predates modern DNA analysis, the lingering mystery has prompted law enforcement to re-examine old evidence with new forensic technology. This push for better forensic science has benefited other cold cases as well. The Zodiac in popular culture. The Zodiac Killer has remained a fixture in popular culture, inspiring countless books, movies, and TV shows. Some of the most notable representations include The 2007 film Zodiac, directed by David Fincher, this film meticulously explores the case and its impact on journalists and law enforcement. Books like Zodiac by Robert Graysmith, written by a journalist who became obsessed with solving the case. This book has fueled further interest in the mystery. Theories in online communities. The internet has allowed amateur sleuths to analyze evidence, discuss theories, and attempt to solve the case in ways that were not possible during the original investigation. The Zodiac's enigmatic persona has made him one of the most fascinating and terrifying criminals in history. Unlike killers such as Jack the Ripper, whose crimes occurred in the 19th century, the Zodiac's murders took place in the era of modern police work, yet he still managed to escape justice. The psychological toll on investigators and survivors. The failure to capture the Zodiac has haunted law enforcement officials who worked on the case. Many detectives spent their careers chasing leads that ultimately led nowhere, and some died believing they had the right suspect but could never prove it. For the survivors, the Zodiac's legacy is far more personal. Individuals like Brian Hartnell, who lived through a brutal attack, have had to endure decades of speculation and media attention. Others, like the families of the victims, have been left with unanswered questions, wondering why their loved ones were targeted and whether the killer was ever within reach. The influence on future serial killers. The Zodiac killer's ability to manipulate the media, taunt law enforcement, and create a persona of terror has influenced other criminals. Serial killers such as the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, and the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, employed similar tactics, sending cryptic messages, reveling in their infamy, and playing mind games with the public. Even mass shooters and modern criminals have drawn inspiration from the Zodiac's methods, using fear as a weapon to gain notoriety. The case has served as both a warning and a blueprint for those who seek attention through violent means, unanswered questions, and ongoing investigation. The Zodiac case remains open in several jurisdictions, with modern detectives still reviewing old evidence in hopes of a breakthrough. The development of forensic genealogized successfully to identify the Golden State Killer in 2018 offers a glimmer of hope that the Zodiac's identity might one day be uncovered. Some of the biggest unanswered questions include: did the Zodiac have more victims? Some researchers believe he may have been responsible for murders beyond the 5 officially confirmed cases. Why did he stop? Did the Zodiac choose to fade into obscurity? Or did he die before he could be caught? Was he ever investigated? Some theories suggest that the Zodiac may have been questioned, but ultimately slipped through the cracks due to lack of definitive evidence. The myth versus the reality. Over the decades, the Zodiac has taken on an almost mythical status. However, at his core, he was a man, someone who walked among the public, blending into society while carrying out horrific crimes. The idea that a killer could vanish without consequence has fueled both fascination and fear. The Zodiac's ability to remain an enigma has only heightened his legend. Unlike serial killers who were caught and exposed, he remains a faceless specter in the annals of criminal history. His letters, ciphers, and threats left a permanent mark on the world of true crime, ensuring that his story would never be forgotten. Will his identity ever be revealed? As new forensic methods continue to develop, law enforcement remains hopeful that the case may one day be solved. Advances in DNA technology, artificial intelligence for handwriting analysis, and digital cryptography may provide new insights that were not possible in the 1960s and 1970s. The Zodiac's legacy is one of mystery, horror, and unresolved justice. Whether he will ever be identified remains uncertain. But one thing is clear: his impact on crime, culture, and the collective consciousness is everlasting. Will the final piece of the puzzle ever be found, or will the Zodiac killer remain a ghost in history forever? Modern investigations: can he still be caught? Decades after the Zodiac killer's last confirmed letter, the hunt for his identity remains alive. With advancements in forensic science, new theories, and breakthroughs in criminal investigations, there is still hope that the Zodiac's true identity may one day be revealed. The role of DNA analysis in the Zodiac case. One of the biggest developments in crime solving over the past few decades has been the advent of DNA forensics. Cases once thought impossible to solve have been cracked using forensic genealogy, a method that played a crucial role in identifying the Golden State Killer in 2018. Could the same technique be used to unmask the Zodiac? Investigators have attempted to extract DNA from the Zodiac's letters, but there are challenges. The age of the evidence makes it difficult to obtain a complete DNA profile. Some letters may have been handled by multiple people, potentially contaminating any samples. The Zodiac may have been careful, avoiding leaving behind biological material by having someone else lick the stamps or envelopes. However, there is still optimism. In 2021, forensic experts announced that they were reanalyzing the letters using modern techniques. If a viable DNA profile is extracted, it could be compared to genealogy databases, potentially leading to a long-awaited breakthrough. Artificial intelligence and cryptography in the Zodiac case. The Zodiac ciphers have puzzled experts for over 5 decades, but recent advancements in artificial intelligence, AI, have provided new tools for solving them. In 2020, a team of amateur cryptographers successfully cracked the Zodiac's infamous 340-character cipher, which had baffled investigators for years. The decrypted message read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." While this was a significant breakthrough, the remaining Zodiac ciphers are still unsolved. AI and machine learning algorithms are now being used to analyze patterns, linguistic clues, and hidden messages within the letters. If these ciphers contain any revealing information about the killer, modern technology might be the key to decoding them. The continued search for physical evidence. Though the Zodiac left little forensic evidence behind, some physical clues remain. The blood-stained shirt fragment of Paul Stein, which the Zodiac mailed to the press. Fingerprints lifted from the crime scenes, including the taxicab where Stein was murdered. Handwriting samples from various Zodiac letters, which continue to be analyzed by forensic linguists. With modern forensic techniques, these pieces of evidence could still yield new information. Some cold cases have been solved by reevaluating fingerprint databases with improved technology. Could the Zodiac's fingerprints already be on file, waiting for the right comparison? New suspects and renewed interest. Over the years, the case has attracted new investigators, both professionals and amateurs, who have identified additional suspects. In 2021, a team known as the Case Breakers claimed that a former Air Force veteran, Gary Francis Post, was the Zodiac. They cited a scar on his forehead that resembled the suspect's police sketch and suggested cryptic anagrams hidden in the Zodiac's letters pointed to his name. However, law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, have not officially confirmed Post as a suspect, and many experts remain skeptical. While some new theories hold promise, definitive proof remains elusive. Can the Zodiac still be alive? If the Zodiac was between 25 and 40 years old during his confirmed murders in the late 1960s, he would be in his 80s or even 90s today if still alive. Given the passage of time, it is increasingly likely that he has passed away, potentially taking his secrets with him. However, even if he is no longer alive, forensic genealogy and advanced crime-solving techniques may still uncover his identity posthumously, just as was done with the Golden State Killer. Why solving the Zodiac case still matters? Many people ask, why does it matter if the Zodiac is identified now? After all, his crimes happened over half a century ago. However, solving the case remains important for several reasons. 1. Justice for the victims and their families. Even decades later, the families of Zodiac's victims deserve closure. Knowing the identity of the killer could bring long-awaited answers. Advancement of forensic science. If the Zodiac is identified using modern forensic techniques, it could help law enforcement refine methods that could be applied to other cold cases. 3. Psychological understanding of serial killers. Understanding who the Zodiac was and why he did what he did could provide valuable insights into the minds of similar criminals. 4. Ending one of the greatest mysteries in crime history. The Zodiac case has captivated the public for generations. Finding out the truth would bring an end to one of the most notorious unsolved crimes in American history. Will the Zodiac be identified? While no breakthrough has been confirmed yet, the case is far from forgotten. Law enforcement, independent investigators, and technology continue to push forward in the hopes of finally unmasking the Zodiac killer. The question remains, Will modern science and forensic advancements finally reveal the identity of the man who taunted the police, sent cryptic messages, and vanished without a trace? Or will the Zodiac remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the hunt for the Zodiac is not over. The Zodiac killer case represents one of the most perplexing and haunting mysteries in true crime history. The killer's ability to evade capture, manipulate the media, and taunt authorities has cemented his place in criminal lore. Even if the Zodiac is never definitively identified, his case has changed the way serial crimes are investigated, how law enforcement handles taunting killers, and how forensic science continues to evolve. For now, the Zodiac remains a shadowy and unidentified figure who once terrorized Northern California and vanished into history. But with every new piece of evidence analyzed, every old letter re-examined, and every new forensic tool developed, we move one step closer to solving the mystery that has fascinated the world for over 50 years. Will the Zodiac's final cipher be cracked? Will his DNA lead to an unexpected name? Or will the legend of the Zodiac remain an eternal question mark in the annals of crime? Only time and science will tell.